Good evening. Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. Please note that the opinions voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network nor our sponsors. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Good evening. Welcome to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. Thank you for listening. We are WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm your host, Kat Hobson. We have got a show tonight that I am going to love. I know you are too. I have been aware of Hayley for some time now, and it's a lot of fun when you actually finally get to talk to someone who you find interesting. I've seen work that she has done. If you follow her on her Facebook page, she has got some of the most interesting articles. It's just a lot of fun, and we share a lot of the same interests. And I just found out we were at the same event last year, and I didn't even run into her, so there's that. But Hayley is an author. She has a new book coming out, and it's pretty neat. We are going to be discussing that too. And her book is titled The Bringers of Life, The Cosmic History of the Divine Feminine. And I can't wait to get my hands on a hard copy because that's going to be incredible. Hayley, you are so much fun, and I am so glad that you're joining me tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Kat, for having me. I can't wait to, talk about everything we have in store for tonight and see where we go with our conversations.
Well, it's never boring. And I tell you, after perusing the information that you gave me about your book, I don't even know if we have enough time with a 2-hour show. This is going to be great.
Yes, and there's so much to say, and since we don't have time to talk about it all, I guess some of you will just have to read the book when it comes out.
Absolutely. And you're going to let people know when that is, as far as you know, and I'm sure it'll be available everywhere. So, and I know they're going to want autographed copies, so you're going to have to be appearing in places. So I can't wait for that for you too.
I can't wait either. And so right now we are planning on the book being out sometime this upcoming spring. When I have a more definite date, I will provide that, but it should be available on Amazon, and it will be published by Adventures Unlimited Press. So it will be available online and from multiple sources. So it shouldn't be any trouble to find it.
Excellent. Well, when you're not very old, you're still in school, and when you started getting into this, how did you decide that archaeology and global exploration and ancient geometry and building techniques and all of that was going to be your color Kool-Aid?
Well, that's an interesting question, because there are so many different roads in my life that have led me to this specific place that I am now. Honestly, when years ago, I remember being a senior in high school and wondering, what am I going to do? I wanted to do something with history, but I thought, I don't want to be a history teacher. I don't want to be sitting in a classroom. I don't want to be teaching sites from a classroom. I want to be teaching sites from the site itself. And so I thought for a long time about this. And it wasn't until I was on vacation with my sister, and we were down at the beach somewhere in Texas, and we were watching some TV show on the Travel Channel, and one of the people on the TV show mentions he has a degree in archaeology, and he travels the world going to different sites, and he's hired on for different projects. And I thought, wow, that's what I want to do. I want to get paid to be, on the side of the rope where I can actually touch the site, where I can be hands-on learning. I don't want to be a tourist on the other side of the rope. Although
Exactly.
I have been for my fair share of time, and it's great whenever you get the opportunity to go to these sites. So anytime anybody can go anywhere, I highly suggest it, because that's ultimately what started my love for these sites. And I remember seeing these things on TV. I remember seeing Chichen Itza on the History Channel, and that was the face of the History Channel. And I saw that, and I thought, you know what? I want to go there. I've got to see this in person. I just got to see this for myself. And when I went and I saw it, that was the beginning of a lot of adventures to come. And here I am now, and I've been to Europe. I have been to Central and South America, and I'm actually going back to Europe next month. And
I saw
I'm really
that.
excited
That's going to be fun.
What comes up. Yes.
Well, you don't go by yourself. So how did you get connected? I know that I saw pictures of you with David and Hugh, who are two people that I admire a lot, and great teachers. So
yes, they are great. And initially, I've traveled to many places with different people, but some of the people that I've gone with have been archaeologists that were known names. They were specializing in Mayan archaeology. I traveled with them to certain parts of, different parts of Mexico. And so I traveled with them. They are more of a scholar-based academic group. They're PhDs. That's what they spent their life doing, is working in Mexico at Mayan sites. And then, yes, David Childress is a great friend of mine. Him and his wife, Jennifer, they have taught me so much, and they're like family. So I'm very thankful for them. And, of course, Hugh goes, on those trips with us, and he's another good friend. And so I'm thankful for all my mentors that, have guided me and given me the opportunities to go on these trips, for sure.
What was your first location that you were actually able to go in and fully experience the history of that?
Oh, that's a good question. There, in Texas is where I was raised, and we have historical sites in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
We have Native American sites in Texas, but they're not like the grand sites of Chichen Itza or Newgrange in Ireland or Karnak in France or the pyramids in Egypt. They're small sites, but I was born in San Antonio, and what really started my love for history was growing up in a city like that. It was so rich with history, and my favorite field trip was going to the Alamo, and just being in the Alamo as a little kid. I was so amazed by the history and the people that had come to that place and lost their lives there. And I thought to myself, I want to learn more about these people, and that's really what spurred me. Growing up in that city, it's full of history. I couldn't get away from history in San Antonio, so of course
that's true. That's a very cool location.
Yeah, we moved to East Texas, and so now in East Texas, there's not too many, public sites you can visit, but I'm not too far from the Caddo Mounds, and it was actually hit by a tornado this spring, sadly, but the mounds are still there, and you can still see them. And I think my first real experience going to another site that wasn't within the U.S. was going to Mexico, and I got to see many sites there, Mayan sites, and just standing before them, and I was just in awe. And at that point, I thought to myself that there was so much to learn, that even we started excavating, we have for decades, but there's so much more to the story that we haven't totally uncovered yet, and that's why we'll have to keep digging and digging, because there's always more to learn.
There is. And I'm always amazed that no matter how much we think we know and how much, people are wanting to solidify this evidence as being, okay, this is the latest and greatest. This is it. And, what is that? We make plans and God laughs, because new things are being discovered all the time. They just had a site that was, 9,000 years older than anything they had anticipated or experienced yet, that was found over in North Africa?
Yeah, there's sites that are constantly being discovered, sites that start showing, evidence of cultures. In fact, I just heard about a site that uncovered a burial, and this burial dated back 100,000 years. And I can't recall the exact location of it, but it was really recent news. And this is a game changer for the archaeological and anthropological world, because cultures back then were not supposed to be spiritual, religious or organized in those ways. And here was a religious burial that was dated to be 100,000 years old. And I just heard about that yesterday, so I can't exactly remember where it was, but it just really opened up my mind and reminded me that we don't know everything, and we're still discovering so many new things. It's incredible. It's the possibilities are literally endless.
See, that's what I love about your field. There's really never going to be an end result. As long as people are willing to go out there and do what you do. And, I mean, you work very hard. You're still in school. You're doing this research. You're writing this book. You are going and experiencing these locations. You've got great mentors that you're working with. And you're never going to run out of something to do. You're never going to get bored with your career.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's really neat.
And it is. And it's also it's a blessing, and it's also a lesson for a lot of people, because it makes us, it reminds us, actually, it doesn't make us, but it reminds us that we have to stay humble, and we have to understand that there are things that we might not agree with that might change history.
Mm-hmm.
It might change the course of religious texts and the validity of their, what they say about certain places and events. And based on the archaeological record, that can help us determine if these things were happening, if they weren't happening, or how they happened. And so I know that it's caused a lot of stigma in the world of religion based on some of the findings. And just like, for example, and we talked about this in one of my courses this spring, in Egypt, it is said that the Egyptians owned Hebrew slaves. But guess what? The archaeological record tells us that the Egyptians were not a slave-owning culture. And so, where does this come from then? How does this affect people and their beliefs? And so the way that archaeology and science can affect people and their beliefs also is another interesting part of the field of archaeology, really.
Well, I was talking with a gentleman who does a lot of work in Egypt relevant to the pyramids. He has a very interesting take on why they're there. And he said that, no, it wasn't. It was Remy who had said that they found kind of like a timesheet, this foreman's journal.
Mm-hmm.
And that, that changed the whole time frame of how long it took to build the Great Pyramid, but still, slaves don't keep journals.
No, slaves were not literate.
Right. And there's a difference because, they had people who were just basic people, not royalty and not the elite, who had their own language versus the elites. But, they were not, it did not seem to be a slave culture in the way that he was describing that too. And I actually had a stone that I was having him look at, and that's when I learned about the different languages. But you're right. Of course you know that, but other people may not know that that's actually true. That's how that worked.
Yes,
they were
and
employees.
It's very, very different from what we are taught biblically or in religious foundations. And so it's important to keep an open mind and to see these things with a fresh light, and to discover that things are not always as they presented themselves to really be. They're constantly ideas of the past are constantly being built upon, better understood with new technology, new ideas. And it's important that we remember that the translations in the Bible that we read today, the King James Bible, they have been translated many times. So we probably don't have everything 100% correct as the people intended it to be read when it was written.
Well, I would agree because, everything that we have as a Christian religion was controlled by the Romans. And everything that we read in our Bible is what the Romans felt like we needed to read. And I think it was a control document. It was geared to lead minds where they wanted them to go and to create behaviors that they wanted. Just me.
Absolutely.
But I do know that, again, that's never boring, and the research on that is never boring. And I know that over the last 40 years, with just in 40 years, the different translations of the Bible are all different. So, they have different terminology, they have different outcomes to stories, some of them, and that's just in 40 years. That's not 2000. So that makes it interesting.
It does, and it's also important to remember that when we look at the Bible, we are looking at a piece of literature, and the books found in the Bible came from a council that was held, a very long time ago, and I want to say in the 4th century, and it was by Constantine I. He was actually unbaptized, but he presided over the discussion where they determined what books were going to stay in the Bible, what books they didn't want in the Bible. It wasn't just, one day Jesus or anybody else that was of his stature or of his power, being the Son of God or being, related to God in that way. It wasn't anybody like that chose what books went in the Bible. In fact, it was Constantine that oversaw this council of multiple men from different backgrounds that put these books together. So whatever books they didn't think, that needed to be in the Bible, they just threw out, and they only included what they thought was needed to be in there. So some of these lost books, some of them are being brought to light now, and this actually kind of ties in with my book. There is, of course, a lost gospel of Mary Magdalene. Not a whole lot is known about it. It's not pieced together very well. There are bits and pieces of it missing, but that was actually one of the books that was allegedly thrown out. was the lost gospel of Mary Magdalene.
And with that, we are going to have to go to our first break. I told you this was going to go too fast. So, y'all, we will be right back with Hayley Ramsey. Y'all come right back, too.
You are listening to WPHM Digital Broadcasting. The best in paranormal talk radio.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I am Kat Hobson, your host, and I am joined tonight by Hayley Ramsey. We are having the best time with our conversation, and I think there was a misunderstanding, Hayley, over in our chat room because someone said that Christians decided which 21 books would be included, and that's not quite right. It was the Romans who decided which books would be included. And
well, yes, this was the case, but it was a council of bishops.
Right.
Constantine presided over this, so this was something that occurred that was actually taking place in a time with Constantine presiding over it, who had really not been too familiar with the text that they were talking about. He was kind of just there to watch over. Yes, it was Christian bishops that did actually decide, kind of argue and go back and forth and debate these things, but essentially Constantine was the one that was presiding over it.
Right. Okay, doke. Well, good deal. Thank you for clarifying that. So, during the break, I always tell people that somebody should actually record these breaks because so much discussion happens. But it's really funny because it's not going to be me. I like our breaks to be, conversational like that. But you're a member of several different organizations already. Yeah, you're the New England Antiquities Research Association as well as the World Explorers Club. You are actually currently, if I'm not mistaken, working on an archaeological project of your own. Is that correct?
Which one? There's several.
I know, right? But the one I'm connecting the ancient sites across the U.S. Is that just North America? Or is that through the Americas? What are you doing with that?
Well, in the U.S., there's a lot of people that don't understand that you don't have to fly overseas to see some pretty cool ancient sites. Just like one of your guests you had on not too long ago, Dennis Stone, he's the owner of a very, very complex site known as America's Stonehenge now in Salem, New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And there's a possible, Phoenician presence, ancient Canaanite presence here that was here, and possibly a Celtic presence. And there are sites all around the U.S., just like Serpent Mound, where I spend a lot of time in Peebles, Ohio. And this serpent effigy has many different astrological alignments, and it's something that still baffles archaeologists and anthropologists today. But the project that I'm really working on actually is connected to the serpent. And the serpent has been worshipped in many different cultures on a global scale. In the U.S., we have the Serpent Mound in Peebles, Ohio, that is very well known. However, there are many documented serpent effigies built as rock walls in the New England
Dennis
area.
has one.
Yeah, he does, and they're very, very interesting. And actually, I got to look at those while I was up there a couple months ago.
Did you just absolutely love the opportunity to go through that site? I think that's one of my favorite sites that I've learned about.
Yes, I had a ball, and it was amazing. And so that was actually part of my research into this bigger scale project about the serpent in North America. The prevalence of the serpent all over the United States, whether it's in New England, Ohio, whether it's in California to Florida, it's everywhere. And so that's just kind of a snippet of something I'm working on. I'm trying to connect these sites and see how they are related.
Well, I saw you post something, oh my gosh, it was on your Facebook page about, let me find that information because I think I wrote it down. But you were talking about monolithic stones with the writing, if I'm not mistaken.
Now there's a rune stone. I just got to go.
It was the rune stone. Yeah, the Scandinavian rune stone in Minnesota.
Yes, that's one of my favorite topics.
Well, so, isn't that just not something anyone would ever expect?
No, absolutely not. And it's been the subject of controversy for centuries now. I mean, it was discovered in 1898 by a farmer named Olaf Oman on his farm in Minnesota, not too far from Alexandria. That's the closest city, I believe. And he discovered it. It was actually there's been much controversy over it, whether he carved the runes himself. He was from Sweden, so that gives some people the idea that he could have done it himself. He could have carved these runes, being a Swede. However, there was testing done later on that has determined that the roots that were actually wrapped around the stone had to have been in place for 20 years prior to the discovery of it by Olaf Oman. So that kind of helped clear Olaf's name. But it was such a big deal at the time, and it was horrible for his family. He went through so much, and in fact, one of his daughters committed suicide because the name was slandered. The Oman name was put, it was left in ruins after all these people were just so harsh about this stone having to be a fake. And nobody was looking at the science. Everybody was just pointing fingers without basis, without scientific basis. And that's what totally ruined Oman's, family's life at the time. It was very difficult for him to recover from that. And he never really did, I don't think. But hopefully he's looking down now, smiling, knowing that there has been actually a lot more testing done to authenticate the stone and clear his name.
Well, I'm glad to know that because I get so exasperated, and it's really in any field where someone has something that is a really surprising but wonderful artifact or experience, and they're just completely blown out of the water, attacked viciously for no reason by people who are defending ideas as opposed to following evidence. It's just wrong.
Very wrong on so many levels, and I agree. The story of the Kensington Runestone, as it's been come to be known as, it is a very interesting stone. It has many different runes on it, and it talks about the voyage of, I believe there's Scotlanders and there's Norwegians. So it talks about people coming from afar on a land acquisition, and it actually marks the death of 10 of their men, I believe. And so the question that has really been asked is, well, where's these 10 dead men? There's been no finding of any graves of these 10 dead Norse men. And so it's interesting to look for those, but also you've got to consider what were their burial practices culturally. But one of the big pieces of evidence that actually does tell us that it's an authentic artifact is one of the runes is known as the dotted R. Now, the dotted R was actually not discovered in the academic world until the 1930s. So the dotted R is only found on graves of Cistercian monks on the island of Gotland. And the reason the stone can be connected to the Knights Templar is because of these dotted R's. The Cistercians were a monastic order, and the monastic order was responsible for beginning the Order of the Knights Templar. And the date on the stone actually dates it to 1362, which would have been after the initial put down of the Templars in 1307. So perhaps they were on a journey trying to practice their ideologies and escape persecution after 1307.
Interesting. Well, I just want people to know that if they follow you on Facebook, they can read this whole article, and I'm probably going to post that link in the show archives because I think this is fascinating. And I'm so glad that you shared it because it's not something that I would have come across probably without you. And thanks very much. So, what other things are you finding that you're connecting together? What are some other sites across the U.S. that are just really fascinating to you?
There's so many. I mean, one of my biggest interests has to do with the Templars coming here, or Cistercian order, or actually the Canaanites, the Phoenicians. And they're all tied together. And it seems to me that the Templars, of course, a lot of them were actually not killed when they announced the order had been declared heretical. A lot of them were long gone. Someone tipped them off, and all their fleets were gone. Where'd the fleet of Templar ships go? They couldn't have just disappeared. They had to go somewhere, and so they possibly went to North America. Of course, there's the idea that perhaps they went to Oak Island, or perhaps they came to Kensington, Minnesota. I mean, you never know what happened. So that's why we're looking for evidence. And other sites that interest me as well include, of course, America's Stonehenge. Now, this site is much older, but it can be connected because of a chamber that has an astronomical alignment that relates it to another site that is probably linked to the Templars. So backing up a little bit, one of these sites that's related to the Templars is known as the Newport Tower, Newport, Rhode Island. The Newport Tower has also been the subject of much archaeological controversy, and it was probably constructed, a few hundred years ago, maybe more, and it actually has a keystone that is nearly identical to a keystone in one of the chambers at America's Stonehenge that is much, much older, probably hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 to 2,000 years old. And it's really interesting to me to see the connections. Now, at the Newport Tower, it has an astronomical alignment, and the feature of these alignments on archaeological sites is known as archaeoastronomy. So this is when the people, and it can still be done today, we can build our houses facing the rising and setting of the sun on a certain day. So the ancients definitely did it, and they harnessed that power, that ideology that there is this sanctity between the heavens and the earth. And this concept of two sacred opposites is known as dualism. And so at the Newport Tower in Newport, Rhode Island, it stands with 8 arches, and the 8 is always associated with the planet Venus, the goddess in the heavens. And so Newport Tower has this one keystone that is shaped like an egg that is illuminated during the sunrise on winter solstice. And now that site can be connected to Dennis's site because there's a chamber there that I crawled into when I was there, and it was really fun. And I got down in there, and I said, Dennis, look at this stone. And so I'm sure you've seen it before, of course. It's his site after all. And there's this keystone there, and it's white, and it looks like the exact same shape in the back. So I pull out my program on my phone where you can kind of track the sun on certain days. And as I did that, it's been rising just about probably 9 a.m., which is the exact time that the Newport Tower's keystone is illuminated on winter solstice. But
Holy
this
wow.
keystone would have been illuminated only on the spring equinox sunrise.
Wow. There's so many synchronicities, and, you know, I'm not a great believer in coincidence.
Me either, let me tell you. And I can tell you there's sites all over the world that are similar to this. And in fact, in Ireland, I just got to go to a site called Newgrange, which is very, very popular. And it's actually, I want to say it's 5,000 years old, over 5,000 years old. And on winter solstice at 9 a.m., the sun rises, and it's actually peeking into the very back of this earth chamber. And what happens is as the sun rises at 9 a.m., it actually comes to a point in the very, very back of the chamber where there is a 90-degree angle between the ground and the wall. And what that is showing us is an impregnation of Mother Earth's womb by the masculine deity in the heavens, the sun.
That is neat.
At 9 a.m.
How do you determine that?
Well, there's many different ways, but there are people that specialize in the field of archaeoastronomy that can go and use their tools to track the locations of the planets, stars, and planetary bodies. You know, like, for example, there's obviously you can go and watch, but just being there and seeing that, you can see that. But unfortunately, there's only a handful of people lucky enough to get to go. They do drawings, and you can enter to win the opportunity to be there for this. But while I was there, I believe the man that was giving us a tour had shown us with his flashlight what it would have initially looked like, or there was some kind of duplication of what it would have looked like on winter solstice. And so It was only on the solstice that it came to that exact perfect point where it was. And the chamber itself is actually shaped like a cross. And in the chambers to the right and to the left, the parts of the T extending the arms of the T, on the right side and the left side, there was a bowl. And archaeologists like to say that it was probably used to place human remains in, but they're small bowls. And in my experience, from my personal opinion, is that they were actually used for ritual bathing or baptismal purposes. And it's not just Christianity that has been using baptism as one of their holy rituals. It actually goes back a lot farther, and baptisms were done in many different societies and cultures, but one of the most prevalent societies we know today that still uses ritual bathing, aside from Christianity, is the Masonic Order. The Freemasons are known to have had rituals including ritual bathing and such things. So there's interesting connections to see where some of the present-day modern rituals come from that actually come from ancient rituals like this. And so the T, the cross that we're seeing here, was not representing Christ. It was not representing the crucifix that he was crucified on, but rather this cross was representing the feminine reproductive system. This is representing the birth canal and the fallopian tubes. And this is their depiction of it. And so this is how they present this union between heaven and earth, the sun and earth. And this is how we see the sun being reborn again. This is their sacred symbolism telling us a story about how the sun is going to be reborn and life will return upon earth in the springtime. So it's really beautiful when you see that dualism there and that very, very complex storytelling through symbolism.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Because I read this subject matter a lot, and I did not know that. So I would venture to say that you're educating a lot of our listeners tonight, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. How often?
It's my pleasure.
How often is this repeated around the globe? I mean,
at Newgrange, it's repeated every winter solstice. Now, there are sites that do this much more. Well, actually, there are sites that have much more complex aspects than just Newgrange having that one alignment. There are sites that have alignments on winter solstice, summer solstice, the equinoxes, both spring and fall. And so even sites like Serpent Mound here in America, they actually have alignments. The points of the coils. If you have not seen Serpent Mound, please pull up a picture because you will just be very impressed by the site itself. And so the different coils point to different alignments on the equinox and on winter solstice. The head of the serpent actually points to the sunset on summer solstice. And so at Serpent Mound, which I was there actually for the summer solstice sunset, you can see the sun setting and illuminating the head of the serpent, and it's very beautiful. There is even an astrological alignment there with Polaris in the tail, the spiral of the tail.
That's too cool. I tell you what, I have always been fascinated by this. I've not been able to travel to very many sites, and now I'm getting to where I can. So we're going to be chatting about where to start when we're off the air. But I am just so amazed because I did not realize so many sites. And actually what I was asking when I asked, how often is this repeated? I meant how often is the experience repeated around the globe that you're aware of?
Do you mean as in how many sites mirror this type of union or this type of astrological alignment?
I think how many different sites have been found to have this astrological alignment?
Oh, wow. Well, we're still finding sites today. There's thousands. I mean, you would not believe how many sites. You go to Mexico, and you go to Peru, you go to France, you go to Ireland. I mean, they're everywhere. And even in America, the sites at America's Stonehenge, just like I was talking about, that one stone chamber with the white egg-shaped stone, that shows us the sunrise and the union between that white stone and the sun on the morning of the spring equinox. And now over in France, we have the Karnak stones. They're very mathematically, they're very complex. And mathematically, it's just so overwhelming to see this because they have alignments with so many different stars, so many different planets. It's never ending. And when you go to Newgrange, you see the sun has it's not just the sun actually at Newgrange. There's a Venus alignment there too. The Venus follows the sun as the sun sets. And actually, you could say that it is a reproduction temple because it's the sun impregnating the earth. But also outside of the actual mound, the chamber itself, there is a lintel stone, and there's also relief X's that are there. And these X's, there's 8 of them. The significance of these 8 X's is that the X is a sacred symbol of the union between masculine and feminine. The V, of course, represents the womb, the feminine, and the upside-down V represents the phallus, the masculine. And so when these two come together, we see that union that can reproduce and create life. This is the bringing of life into this world. And so the 8 X's are symbolic, and they are talking about Venus. And so this also alludes to not only there being a sun alignment here, but also a Venus alignment. 8 is associated with Venus for many reasons, but the most prevalent being that it makes the shape of, it does make the shape of 8 at some point too, but it takes 8 years, Earth years, for Venus to make this entire cycle that actually makes a 5-pointed star in the heavens. And so this 5-pointed star takes 8 Earth years to make, but it takes 8 Venus years and 13 Earth years to make, I believe. Oh no, I got that backwards. Venus makes 13 and it makes 8 on Earth. Yeah, that's kind of confusing. Venus, of course, makes many more revolutions than the Earth. And so it's really interesting to see that that's part of the reason that we consider 13 to be associated with the divine feminine, because Venus takes 13 cycles around as it completes that cycle.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you because we are late for our break. But we will be right back. Thank you so much for being here, guys. I hate to stop this flow, but we're going to have to go follow rules. We'll be right back.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama. To the believer, the evidence is overwhelming. To the skeptic, there will never be enough. Hello, everyone. Join Kevin and Jennifer Malik, the host of Paraversal Universe, every Friday here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting, also heard on WCET-FM and The Rift. Log on or tune in as they check out the mysteries found within the 8 categories of the unknown and unexplained, including ghosts and haunted places, aliens and UFOs, theology and mythology, cryptids and monsters, urban legends and folklore, conspiracies, metaphysics, and forbidden archaeology. Listen as Kevin and Jennifer interview the top minds in their respective fields as they share theories and information regarding these unsolved mysteries. For future show and archive information, one can find Paraversal Universe on Facebook, Twitter, and MeWe under various Paraversal Universe headings. So, for excellent talk radio about the unknown and unexplained, check out Paraversal Universe, where all paranormal perspectives apply. Brought to you by the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society, Ltd., and produced by WBHMDB.com.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I am so glad you're here, and man, do I hope that you are enjoying this conversation as much as I am. Hayley Ramsey is an archaeologist. She is an author. She has a book coming out this spring, and it is just going to be so astounding. The title is The Bringers of Life. Oh, goodness, give me a second here. I always forget I want to make sure I don't do like I did for a typo earlier today. The Bringers of Life, The Cosmic History of the Divine Feminine. And you're bringing this into your archaeological research, and you are really bringing this forward as far as the goddess side of historic sites. And that's what we were talking about relevant to Venus right before I had to cut you off. I'm so sorry about that, by the way. But this is just fascinating stuff. Everybody in chat is just mesmerized.
I'm so glad, because this is the stuff that mesmerizes me on a daily basis. This is what I get excited about. And in fact, right before our break, I got so excited I was, losing my words. But as I was saying, the number 13 is attributed to the goddess in the heavens, known as Venus, because in one Venus cycle that makes the 5-pointed star, which we see actually on the American flag and many other places, it's associated with Venus because that's the pattern that it makes in the heavens during this 8 Earth year cycle and this 13-year Venus cycle. And also another connection to 13 being the feminine number is that women have 13 menstrual cycles in a year. And actually there are 13 lunar cycles in a year too. So this is where we get the number 13 being connected to the sacred feminine. And then we have that connection to Venus in the 13, which is there, just totally connecting the two, Venus and the moon. And of course, they've always been associated with the feminine. And I was talking about there being the 8 X's found at Newgrange. So it's really interesting to think that it was a Venus temple. And there's so many more sites out there like this, but that's one of my favorites for sure.
Well, I just really think that going into there, knowing that these X's were indicative of that, this is this is all things that I am fascinated by. How many, I don't even know how to ask this question, Hayley. When you go into a location and you're looking for these things, you're trying to gather what is actually happening, what this site was officially used for, truly used for. I know there's a lot of different things that are possibilities. How is it that you're not even through with your education yet and you can do this? I think that's just beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it is beautiful. And I count my blessings every day that I've met the right people and I've made the right connections that open up these doors for me to conduct my research, to go to these places. And, you know, honestly, once I started following my heart, as mushy-gushy as this sounds, once I started following my passions, everything has seemed to fall into place. And it just amazes me every day because it still does. And I just persevere with a very positive attitude and think that, you know, this is meant for me. This is my line of work. I am meant to do this. And so it's got to happen. You know, there's nothing that can stop me. I've got to do it. And so I'm very thankful that I've been blessed with the opportunities that I have. And I've gotten to go the places I have. Because a lot of people also don't know that every time you walk into a Catholic church, there's probably lots of goddess symbolism surrounding you.
Yes. Why don't you share some of that?
Well, and for example, I had this total epiphany when I was in France, and that's really when I decided to write this book. That's when this seed was planted, this idea, everything clicked. And it's not just in the cathedrals overseas that you see this, but it's in many cathedrals in the United States as well.
Even the small ones.
Mm-hmm. Yes, even the small ones. In the Roman Catholic Church, there's obviously the veneration of the Mother Mary, but it's important, too, that we don't forget another Mary who was the wife of Jesus.
Yes.
And it is important just to think about the symbolism in the architecture and the building and the artwork found inside of the church. Now, in Chartres, France, in the cathedral there's lots of beautiful symbolism. And in fact, there is a pregnant woman, a statue of a pregnant woman, that points to a cup in her hand, and she's very pregnant. And right next to her is this piece of artwork, and it's basically all these floral designs forming the fallopian tubes and the birth canal. And this is in the Catholic Church. This is in Chartres Cathedral. And not only that, but once you go outside the church, if you're looking at the church, and this is also Notre Dame as well, which is the Church of Our Lady, which is a Templar-built church, as well as Chartres was built by the Templars. But when you look at it, it was built with that sacred idea of goddess. And as you look at it, you start to notice that the towers in the church on the right and left were built to look like knees up in the birth-giving position. And so the center of the church, as you walk in, is actually the female genitals. And so as you walk into the church, you're going into the mother's womb, and when you leave, you are going to be reborn. And this is the sacred ideology that the Templars passed on and that was used to build these cathedrals, these very, very beautiful and sacred places.
I just love that. It is so unusual, and I'm just going to put this out here. It is so unusual to hear someone discussing the feminine side of this history. It is unusual. It's surprising. I think to a lot of people are going to be very, very, very surprised. But this is actually what cranks your boat too. You know, not just going to see them, but also seeing the feminine side of the thought process of the experience. And I know that we have teeny tiny churches here, teeny tiny Catholic churches here, that have some of the most beautiful, ornate designs, very similar to what you're describing. And people don't even know that this is an homage to feminist mystique, but to the feminine side of power. It's just...
Well, and I think that it's not just the feminine side of power, but it's the feminine side of life. Because
yes.
there's an idea, too, that within the Holy Trinity, the Trinity is actually attributed to 3, which is another goddess number. And the Trinity, the triangle, is one of the sacred shapes of the feminine. We have the pubic triangle, the feminine triangle. And that's part of the reason why it's represented as the feminine side. And so that in itself, talking about the Holy Trinity, we're talking about the union and the production of that union. And so when we say the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, we're not just talking about the Father and the Son. We're talking about the Father, the Mother, and the Son.
Yes. How beautiful is that?
It's very beautiful, and it's something
but
that
people don't know.
Bad. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Captain Sally says that's because archaeology is dominated by men. You're a brand new female voice in the study. So I know a couple of women in your field. One of them is an archaeologist out of the University of Alabama in Birmingham. And I didn't even know that she did what she did. I saw her one of the programs on the History Channel, I believe it was. And I'm just like, she's local. I can buy her lunch and hear all this stuff. Oh my gosh. Because there's not a lot of women issues that are discussed in archaeology. It's just, and women have been equal partners for so long in history, in so many different cultures, as opposed to being subjugated by men. It blows my mind when I read how often that happens. And here you are going out into the world, starting your career, and recognizing and bringing that to the forefront. I just think that's a fantastic thing.
Well, I think too, it's not all hearts and roses either.
Well, no, it's not.
Being a girl out in this field too, in itself, being a woman in this field that is dominated by men, like Sally said, and thank you, Sally, for listening. It's nice to know you're here. But it's hard, and I have faced, I won't go into detail, but I have already faced things solely because I am a woman. It's hard to be taken seriously, and not only that, but it's like fresh meat. When you have a young girl thrown out into this world that's dominated by men, it's really hard for to really be taken seriously and not just looked at as a female, a young, attractive female. And so that is a struggle, not just for me, but for many women in this field. There are so many women that experience so many things, and you don't ever hear about it because a lot of us tough women, they just say, well, to hell with it, because that's part of the job. It's going to happen. It's life. And they just grow from it and become stronger. And that's why so many women in this field, and not just this field, but in all aspects of careers and in many different types of fields, women are so strong and they've endured so much, but they continue to be the backbone of civilization. And I think it's important that we remember that women have done so much from us and for us. And we actually come from women. If a lot of us don't remember, that's who brought us into this world. And if it weren't
well, without women, this would be a very empty planet. So
it would be non-existent of human life. It's important to remember your beginnings and where you come from. And so I believe, and I teach this and I preach this, but I believe that women are the backbone of civilization. And that's not only my opinion, but the opinion of many cultures. And for example, this is even crazier too, but I was just at Sundance, at a Lakota Sundance as a supporter last week. And while I was here, I learned about the sacred feminine from the people there. And the time that a woman actually came and brought them these gifts of knowledge, and the time that this knowledge was symbolic of a move forward, of a new age. And so I don't know if many of you follow, or are Lakota maybe, this story of White Buffalo Calf Woman. But White Buffalo Calf Woman was a woman that came to these people.
Wait. No. Because we're going to have to stop that right in the middle, and this is too good. So We're going to come back. We have our top of the hour news break, and when we come back, we are going to be discussing the Buffalo Chalk Woman. Hayley, I am so excited to do that. We will be right back, and you know what? You never know. Maybe we'll find a little good news today. That would be a nice change, wouldn't it? So we'll catch you in a few.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Barbara Klein. Protesters in Hong Kong have finally dispersed after staying in the streets through much of the night and clashing with police who fired tear gas to disperse them. As NPR's Julie McCarthy reports from the territory, hundreds of thousands of demonstrators turned out for the 7th consecutive weekend to demand more autonomy from mainland China.
Since June, millions have taken to the streets demanding that the Hong Kong government preserve, not erode, the liberties they now enjoy. The discontent that began over an extradition bill allowing individuals to be sent to the Chinese mainland for trial has grown. Protesters now demand universal suffrage to pick their own leaders, who are now heavily vetted by Beijing.
NPR's Julie McCarthy. Newly released recordings of radio communications on Friday in the Strait of Hormuz reveal a British warship warned Iran to stop its raid on a UK-flagged oil tanker, but the warning failed to prevent its seizure by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports from London.
The fate of the British-flagged tanker called the Stena Impero plays out in a recording released on Sunday of 2 radio calls. The first came from an officer in Iran's Revolutionary Guard.
You are ordered to change your course to 360 degrees immediately. If you obey, you will be safe.
The second call came from the British warship Montrose, which told the Stena Impero to stay on course.
As you are conducting transit passage in a recognized international strait, under international law, your passage must not be impaired, impeded, obstructed, or hampered.
Minutes later, Iranian forces raided the tanker. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, London.
Saudi Arabia says Iran's actions are unacceptable and calls on the world community to respond. China is signaling that it may resume purchasing U.S. agricultural products. And as NPR's Shannon Van Sant reports, it could also indicate trade talks between the U.S. and China could resume.
China's state-run Xinhua news agency said Chinese companies are talking with U.S. exporters about the purchase of agricultural produce and have applied for the lifting of tariffs on products such as pork, soy, corn, and wheat. The editor-in-chief of China's state-run Global Times newspaper also tweeted that Chinese importers are arranging for the purchase of American farm products and says this means trade talks are likely to restart soon. The White House has said it's very important for China to continue buying American farm products. Chinese investment in the U.S. has fallen by nearly 90% since 2016. Shannon Van Sant, NPR News, Washington.
This is NPR. Pakistani officials say a female suicide bomber has detonated explosives outside a hospital in northwestern Pakistan, killing at least 8 people. The Pakistani Taliban are claiming responsibility. 2 international charity organizations say they're restarting migrant rescue operations in the Mediterranean Sea off the Libyan coast, following what they claim has been obstruction by some European countries. NPR's Sylvia Poggioli reports.
Doctors Without Borders and SOS Méditerranée say they will soon resume search and rescue missions with the Norwegian-flagged Ocean Viking. 7 months ago, they were forced to abandon use of their ship Aquarius due to what their statement called a concerted effort by European governments to block humanitarian actions in the Mediterranean. Over nearly 3 years, Aquarius rescued some 30,000 people. In the first 6 months of this year, the statement said the risk for migrants of drowning at sea more than doubled over the same period last year. Charities pin much of the blame on Italy's anti-immigration interior minister Matteo Salvini, whose closed ports policy has led to several showdowns with ships carrying rescued migrants. Sylvia Poggioli, NPR News, Rome.
Shane Lowry has won the British Open, golf's biggest and oldest championship. This year's tournament was held in Northern Ireland. Lowry is from the Republic of Ireland, but crowds cheered him to victory. I'm Barbara Klein, NPR News in Washington.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. The best in paranormal talk radio.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. You are listening to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine, and I am Kat Hobson, your host. Thank you so much for being here, and if you missed the first hour, no worries, because you can catch our archives, and you're going to want to catch that archive because Hayley is fascinating. You'll find us on iHeart, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Podbeam, and a host of others. We're everywhere you want to be. We're kind of, that way. But this has been great, and you're going to want to listen to that archive. So we're coming back. Hayley, again, thank you so much for joining me. I cannot believe we're into our second hour, and this is so fascinating. We were talking about the Divine Feminine. We were talking about how it had been fought for to get attention drawn back to the feminine. And we were going to talk about the Buffalo Calf Woman before I so rudely interrupted you. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. I get so excited. I get on a roll, and it's hard to, find a stopping point. But, the White Buffalo Calf Woman, please, after I finish talking about her, and I'll get into the Holy Grail, bring me back, please, to the suppression of the goddess after that. Okay. I would like to talk about the White Buffalo Calf Woman and what she means to me and to a culture known as the Lakota. I spent some time last week, actually, at Sundance. I was invited, and thankfully I was invited by a really good friend of mine who is a Black Elk. And so if any of you know the name Black Elk, you'll know that it's a very special family that invited me there. And so I got to go and be a supporter at Sundance. And Sundance happens to be one of the 7 sacred rites of White Buffalo Calf Woman. Now, White Buffalo Calf Woman came to the Plains people about 19 generations ago. When the White Buffalo Calf Woman came to the Lakota people, there is a really interesting story about how she came to be. She comes upon 2 warriors. One has impure thoughts, and she says, "Take a step towards me." And she challenges him because she knows that his motives are impure. And as he takes a step towards her with these bad intentions and lust in his eyes, he turns into dust. And the true warrior, who had a pure heart, stands there just awe-stricken. And she says, "I see your heart is pure. Prepare and tell your people that I will return. And she will bring great wisdom, knowledge, and all kinds of things." So he runs back to his village, and he tells the people, the Lakota people, to prepare because White Buffalo Calf Woman is coming. And she is this beautiful, young, fair maiden depicted in white. And maybe perhaps she could have been considered a white woman herself. I'm not very sure, but I think over time these things can vary. So it's interesting to consider her not only just being known as White Buffalo Calf Woman, but if she could herself have been white too. So that's another interesting aspect of it all. So White Buffalo Calf Woman comes and brings the 7 sacred rites. Now, these 7 sacred rites, there's many different ceremonies. There is Sundance being one of them. And then there is Sweat Lodge, or the rite of purification, and known as a Nipi in Lakota. And then there is the show in the ball ceremony, making a relative ceremony, and I probably am missing 1 or 2. But what I really want to focus on is the Nipi ceremony and the Sundance ceremony. I got to witness Sundance ceremony, which is a ceremony that is very powerful, and it's a ceremony that occurs during the summer, and it was typically done by men initially. And what these people did was they wanted to understand the pain that their sisters went through, because women sacrifice their bodies every time they bring a life into this world. And so what they decided to do was perform a sun dance. And now it sounds like we're dancing for the sun, to honor the sun, but we're not. We're dancing to honor the mother and the father. Mother Earth is so prevalent here. And so what is done in the ceremony, the first day, there's a thing called Tree Day. And Tree Day, men go and they find a tree, a cottonwood tree typically. They cut this tree down and they bring it to the dancing arena and they put it up in the dancing arena and they tie ribbons to it. And in this arena, there are the four directions honored. And so north, east, west, south. So anyway, people then dance the next day. And as they dance, they fast for 4 days. They do not eat or drink. And so these people are dancing and they are attempting to reach spirit world ultimately. They are going into spirit world and they're praying and they are trying to connect with spirit, with Tungashala, which is great spirit, mystery spirit. It is basically the essence of the feminine and the masculine. Sometimes Tungashala is known as grandfather, but ultimately it is representative of the feminine and the masculine. And so in this ceremony, they dance from dawn to dusk. And it is on the fourth day, usually the last day. It varies from tradition to tradition. Women dance now too. And women today in some places can pierce as well. When I say pierce, people are pierced by the medicine man in the chest. The men usually were. They're pierced and tethered to the cottonwood tree. And this sounds pretty gruesome, but actually it's very beautiful and empowering to watch. And remember, these men wanted to connect with their sisters. They wanted to understand what these women went through as they sacrificed their bodies to bring life into this world. And so as these dancers are tethered to this tree of life in the center of the dancing arena, they are tethered by rope or by string, and they have 2 piercings on their chest. And on the final round of dancing, they sit back and they break the cords out of their chest. As they fall back and break free from the tree, they burst from their chest. And this is a symbol of rebirth. This is a symbol of coming out of spirit world. This is a symbol of coming out of Mother Earth. This is a symbol of new beginnings. And the tether, the rope, represented the umbilical cord to Mother Earth. And the cottonwood, to a degree, represented the masculine aspect, the father, son above us. And so it was a very, very moving ceremony to get to be a part of. And another very important part of this is the Chanupa.
The what? I'm sorry.
The Chanupa. It is spelled Chanupa. There are various spellings of it, but this is the sacred peace pipe. And a lot of people just call it the peace pipe because it's easier than saying Chanupa. And so it is a very sacred, it's not just a pipe, but it's a very sacred relic. And what this peace pipe really is, it was brought by white buffalo castlemen 19 generations ago. And you know what? The bundle that she brought with, along with these teachings and these lessons and this music and all kinds of other things, she brought a physical bundle and she bestowed it upon the people. And it had the Chanupa in it. And today it is held by a man named Chief Arvel Looking Horse, who is the 19th generation protector or guardian of this pipe. Now, the pipe itself, the Chanupa in totality, there is a wooden part of it, the stem, and that's the part that we actually put our lips upon to smoke from. But the pipe part of it is made from Minnesota pipestone, usually. And this pipestone represents the feminine, represents Mother Earth. It's a red stone, and it represents the union of the females of Mother Earth's daughters connecting with her. Every month, Native Americans refer to menstrual cycle as having their moon, because this is the time that we are like the moon and have our phases. And so when Native American women, or any woman really, when they have their moon and they bleed back to Mother Earth, they are connecting with the mother. And so this pipestone represents the earth. It represents womanhood. It represents, fertility. It represents all these things. It represents birth. And it reminds us that we are people of this earth and we rely upon Mother Earth. And the stem is the masculine. And so the stem actually goes into the pipe, into the Chanupa. And so the stem is what we smoke from, and this represents the masculine. And this represents the part of growth, of physical growth outward of the earth. And so it's really beautiful to see that parallel there. But what's really fascinating to me is there's a story about the return of white buffalo castlemen. Now, there's many stories that have been passed down might have been changed from generation to generation, but what we hear today is that when White Buffalo Castleman was here and she was bringing us this knowledge, people tried to offer her a fine husband, and a nice place to stay and to remain with them. And she said, no, I have to go back to the spirit world. And she taught them of the 4 sacred colors. And the reason why she's called White Buffalo Castleman is because she rolls into 4 different colors. She rolls first into the 3 colors, red, black, and yellow. And so red, black, and yellow. And finally, the last color she rolls into is the white buffalo. And so there are prophecies about her return. She says that in the time of need, at the end, she will return. And it'll be a time when the 7th generation prophecy kind of ties into this, but she will return at a time that Mother Earth is crying. She will return at a time where she is needed, where that feminine energy is needed again, really. And so she says she will return, and when she does return, there will be white buffalo calves being born. And so, not too many decades ago, I want to say in the 80s or 90s, there was the first white buffalo calf born, and every generation since a white buffalo calf has been born. But the importance here of the antiquity of these relics is actually that this was not something, just a story that someone made up. There are physical relics that have been passed down from 19 generations. And Chief Arvel Looking Horse holds the sacred bundle today. He is the guardian of the sacred bundle. And interestingly enough, there's a whole story to this, because it's not just something that we consider, it's not just the way that we consider generations today. In the Western world, we consider a generation to be 20 years. But in the Lakota culture, they consider a generation to be a lifetime, 100 years. And so if we're talking 19 generations, we're talking nearly 2,000 years, practically, give or take. And what was happening around the world 2,000 years ago?
Fascinating.
I mean, so many different things. Of course, this is the time of Christ, 2,000 years ago, for one. But it's really fascinating to see that this is such an ancient story that there is physical proof of, and she's supposed to return, and she's probably already among us since we have so many white buffalo calves being born. But I want to make a connection here that I think is important. We have stories of the Holy Grail and the goddess. Mm-hmm. The continuation of the bloodline of Christ is one of the ideas that has been made very famous by books, media, movies, all of that. But it could also be not just that bloodline, but it could be that sacred knowledge, wisdom, these ideologies. And if you recall, if any of you are familiar with the Grail stories and the Grail legends, they're very popular and began in the 12th century, I believe. And the most famous stories talk about the Fisher King. And the Fisher King was a king that had a thigh wound. And now a thigh wound typically was the polite way to say that, his manhood was in bad shape. And so at this point, it is believed that he cannot reproduce because of this injury. And so he's the wounded king. And in some stories, he's portrayed as the maimed king, like we see Aslan in Narnia being the maimed king. So the injured king, the Fisher King, he is sitting in the castle. The castle is the Grail. He is a guardian of the Grail. And he has been for quite some time. And it said, actually, that he received this injury because he took a wife, and one of the vows of guarding the Grail is that you're not supposed to take a wife. So, who knows if that's true or not. But this is supposed to take place in Wales. And anyway, the Fisher King is injured, and there's a young knight who is actually first a child that was the son of a knight who died in his knighthood. And his mother moves him to the forest and says, I'm never letting him go back into the town and, be enchanted by knighthood and these horrible things that men do, essentially, that cause death and destruction. So young Percival is playing in the woods one day, and he sees this team of knights riding by him, and he's in awe, and he bows down to these knights. And the knights are like, "Kid, what are you doing?" And Percival says, "Well, my mom always told me to bow to angels." And the knights say, "Kid, we're not angels, we're knights. Get up, come on." And he says, "Well, I want to be like you." And so the knight's like, "Well, okay, you can be like us. Come with us to court." So he goes back to tell his mother that he is going to become a knight at King Arthur's court. And his mother is very, very distraught. And so she does not want him to be maid night, and she dresses him in the worst clothes that she can to make him look as foolish as possible. And now,
no.
I don't know how many people I have out here that are familiar with tarot cards, but the Rider-Waite tarot deck was inspired by the Grail legends, and the Fool on the card is actually supposed to be Percival. And so Percival's dressed like a fool.
Hang on just a minute. Hang on just a minute, because we have to take a break, and I want to hear what's going to happen when he gets to court dressed as this fool. So we'll be right back. Y'all come right back too.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
In today's breaking news, over 1.8 million people have signed a petition that is circulating throughout social media and online, pledging to raid Area 51 in hopes of freeing any extraterrestrials that could be on site. Also seeking full disclosure from the U.S. government. Could anything actually come of this? What could be the outcome? Find out on our continuing coverage at 9 p.m. here on WBHM DB Action News. You're kidding, right? Most of those people could have raided a refrigerator if it weren't for it having a light in there. How about this? For some real information that you could use, instead of the other, sources, stay here where you are, on WBHM, DB, Birmingham, Alabama.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour. Y'all, we are back with Fate Mag Radio, and I'm sorry, I know that was a cliffhanger. Hayley, thank you for your patience with that, because in chat we've got, no, not a break. So, we were discussing that his mom had dressed him up as a fool to go to court with these knights.
Yes, so as young Percival goes to court with these knights, he is dressed like a fool, the fool we see on the Fool card in the tarot deck that Rider-Waite designed. And he goes to court, and he is young and innocent and naive, and he doesn't know the rules of knighthood. And he is here. And there is a knight that is dishonest that the Fisher King, who is injured, is not getting along with. And he takes it upon himself to duel and challenge this knight, that the Fisher King really wasn't strong enough to get rid of himself. And so young Percival probably looks like such a fool at this point. He probably has, the bucket on his head, and he's got a sword, and he can barely see out from under his bucket helmet. He doesn't know what he's doing. But he kills this knight. And everyone's shocked, because this is not something you did as a knight. You didn't challenge another knight unless there was there was absolute reason to found in court through all their different ways of finding guilt and finding their own reason to persecute somebody. And so the young knight just hears that there's problems with him. Well, the young to-be knight, first of all, hears that there's problems with this guy and knows the Fisher King doesn't like him and says, well, I'm going to kill him. Why wouldn't I? So he challenges him and kills him. And the Fisher King is just amazed. And as he's here at this, it's Arthur, my bad, not the Fisher King. Arthur, he's amazed. And so he sends Percival out on this quest to the Grail Castle and to go find the Grail. So this is where the Fisher King is, my bad. So that was King Arthur's court. So they go to the Fisher King's palace, and this is known as the Wasteland. And this is known as the Wasteland because the Fisher King received a thigh injury, which basically means he can't have children. And essentially, because he is suffering and he is sick, the people in the land are suffering. And this is a very interesting topic because it's parallel to some things in other cultures, like in Native American culture, for example. So the earth is suffering because its king is suffering. And instantly, the young knight, the new knight, first of all, he's young and naive, and he wants to go and help this knight. He wants to help him. That's what he wants to do. But because of his newfound position as a knight, and their code of chivalry does not allow for this. He cannot just go and address the king unless he is addressed. So he sits back and ignores his natural instinct to help the king. Well, he goes to sleep this night, and he wakes up, and he's not in his castle anymore. There's nobody around him. And he's so mad, and he's so confused because he was so close to the Grail. And so he rides around this forest for years, growing bitter and angry as time goes by, and he comes upon a hermit. And so he goes and he walks into this hermit's home, and the hermit offers him dinner and says, well, first we're going to pray. And by this point, first of all, it's kind of just like fed up with God. He says, I don't believe in God, this and that. If there was a God, he would have helped me out by now. I've been wandering these woods for years and no avail. So anyway, the hermit says, okay, whatever. So he prays, they eat, and then he goes on to find the Grail Palace once again. And this time when he goes, he sees the Fisher King there. And the Fisher King is the symbol of Earth's distraught, the fall of man, perhaps. And he is also known in another legend as the Maimed King, which we can associate with Aslan and Narnia. He is the Maimed King. That's why they attempt to maim him. That symbolism there is parallel. And so at this point, he ignores all of his knightly instincts that tell him don't help the king. And he goes and helps the king. And he doesn't care about the rules at this point, He doesn't believe in a god at this point, so he just decides to hell with it. And he goes to help this king. And as he goes to help the king is recovered. And he says, son, or grandson, as he addresses him, he says, you don't understand. I've been waiting for you. I have been waiting for you. And apparently the Grail could not be used to heal the Fisher King until the right person came and could use it or wield it, had the power to connect with this Grail. And so when the Grail comes out and he sees the Grail, it is presented by a fair maiden, and supposedly the Fisher King's daughter. And she's a beautiful young maiden, and she comes and she presents the Grail. And now this guardianship of the Grail is passed on. And so the idea that the Grail is guarded by certain families, over time is really interesting because we see the parallel with White Buffalo Castleman's Sacred Bundle. Just like the Grail Maiden who comes to present the Holy Grail, we have the Chanupa being presented. We have the Sacred Bundle being presented by White Buffalo Castleman. And she comes and she blesses it upon the people, and she returns to spirit world. However, she does say that she will return in a time of need, when the earth is crying, when the land is a wasteland, essentially, like the Grail legend. And so it's really interesting to see the parallels here. And the Grail legend, King Fisher, the Fisher King, he is actually symbolic of, Jesus to an extent, but not quite, because really what he is symbolic of is the age of Pisces, the Piscean age, which just recently ended, and we came into this new age of Aquarius in 2012. And so that's the parallel that I see, the importance between the Lakota story of the White Buffalo Castleman, their essential Grail Maiden, and the Grail Maiden in the Arthurian legends.
That is just such an interesting tie-in. I wasn't aware of that. I love that you're educating.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something that I really just came to me, and it was so obvious that there's a connection between these two stories. And now, if White Buffalo Castleman is not the same Grail Maiden, I think that there is certainly some kind of connection in some other way, whether it's a story that's been passed on or perhaps a story that was learned by a people coming here and learning it from the native people and taking it back to Europe. Who knows? This was a story, of course, from Wales, and it just continues to excite me and make me wonder, what connections are here and where did these stories originate from?
This is just way too cool. No wonder you're fascinated by what you do. How could you not be? And in chat, they also are blown away. John says, I'm blown away. I could listen all night without a doubt. This is fantastic
thank
stuff.
You, John.
When you get into the book, the chapter analyses, it's just really fascinating because we've covered a lot of what you have in there. Of course, not nearly all of it. I cannot wait until we do this again because I have so many more questions for you. You've come through the U.S. You have come through the Grail history, which, by the way, that Oak Island, Kevin Burns did such a great job. He is such a great producer, but my husband is an Oak Island freak, so that has been something that's fun. But, I sit there and I look at this stuff when you talk about we were talking about the Roman Catholic Church earlier, and you talk about the veneration of Mary, Queen of Heavens, and the suppression of the goddess when they did mass genocide committed against the pagans, and then killing all of the women in the Renaissance area. I didn't even know that had happened.
Yes. I definitely did want to touch on that, the suppression of women and the Holy Grail and how that's connected. It's amazing what people will do to suppress power, wisdom, and knowledge. And in the Roman Catholic Church, a religion that is supposed to honor thy father and to ultimately be a benevolent cause. They're not supposed to be doing horrible things. One of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not murder. And
yes.
What does the Roman Catholic Church do when these pagans don't want to convert to their religion? They kill them. And there was over 4,500 Anglo-Saxons that would rather take the sword than to convert. And they were all killed within a day. And it is sad to me that
within
this
a
has
day.
to happen. Within a day. And so it amazes me. But the church itself has suppressed the sacred feminine. We see in most of the Bible a lot of these stories that really kind of engulf the sacred feminine are removed at the Council of Nicaea that we talked about earlier, that was overseen by Constantine, like the lost gospel of Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
And she played an important part in the story too. And actually there is a couple archaeologists, 3 women, that set out on this journey to try to prove that these women were relevant in the Bible, and they did it. So I can't remember their names, but they're idols of mine. And women played a really big part in the Bible too, because of course all of the apostles, the male apostles, they had wives too, and the wives came on these spiritual quests and of knowledge and spirituality and wisdom with Jesus. And Mary Magdalene, she was portrayed as a harlot. She was portrayed as this sinful woman that was, a prostitute, and she was never that. There are so many Marys in the Bible in that time period, but Mary of Magdala, who was the wife of Jesus, she is actually a woman that came from Magdala, from a family of very wealthy standing. And actually, her family kind of funded Jesus's, road trips, going around, walking around everywhere and teaching people. That's kind of how they stayed afloat. And from the donations of these wealthy women these families that were part of, his apostleship. But it goes on even further, because the lost gospel of Mary Magdalene, they talk about how Jesus turns and kisses Mary Magdalene, and she's referenced as his companion. And in those times, companion literally meant spouse. So that's a really interesting point. But also that at the Council of Nicaea that we discussed earlier is where Jesus is deified. Jesus was not the Son of God until the Council of Nicaea. And he always told people he was the Son of Man. And he humbled himself because that's who he was. And he was teaching and preaching love and these sacred ideologies. And he continued that on. And so Mary Magdalene, she ultimately probably did bear his children. I'm sure there was a holy bloodline. I'm sure there's truth to that because Jesus was a man, just like he was a person, just like everybody else. And Mary Magdalene was his love. She was, at his side all the time through all these teaching, all these lessons. But in the church, they didn't want to acknowledge that because when you recognize Mary Magdalene being the wife of Christ, being, the chalice of his blood, being the mother of his children, now Jesus is just a man like the rest of us that reproduces, has children, has a family, and he's no longer deified. He's no longer the Son of God in that sense. And to me, it's sad because he was teaching, he was so humble, and he humbled himself to the level of every person on this earth. And for him to be made something that he never wanted, it makes me sad because I see this would have been upset that people tried to make him someone that he wasn't. He was here to teach, and Mary Magdalene carried on that ideology. And I think the reason why she had to flee the site, the crucifixion site, she was in mourning, and so she leaves, and she has to go and collect herself together. But she's pregnant at this time of the crucifixion, and there's actually a very, very interesting life-size statue set in France at St. Remy, which I will go check out. And it shows a very pregnant Mary Magdalene with her hands up in distress. There's the body of Christ laying on this table, and then Mary and Joseph, and I think one other person standing around, the royal family standing around the body of Christ. And this is found in a Templar church in France. And so I've got to go visit that one there next month. But
without a doubt. I know that's going to be one of your first stops.
Yes. So it's been a long history. Mary, Queen of Heaven, she was associated with Venus, of course, too. And in fact, we were talking about the 9 a.m. alignment that occurred at these sites that were probably, initially like at Newgrange in Ireland, 5,000 years old. And then the Newport Tower, which was probably built by the Templars, several hundred years ago, probably 300 to 500 years ago. And it's interesting to see the parallels because the time of these alignments is at 9 a.m. Now in the church, the time of the devotion to Mary is also 9 a.m. So everything is not just a coincidence. These things were implemented on purpose for a reason. And in the church, they tried to remove the women from the picture because for a time, if some of you don't know, women were not allowed to go to church. And women were not allowed to speak in church when they were finally allowed to go. And they didn't read, and men didn't read for a time. It was only what the bishop or the preacher wanted to teach and for you to know. And that is why Mary of Magdala was made out to be a prostitute, because they wanted to make her less than she was as being Jesus' wife in totality.
That is so interesting. The legends that surround that situation, I mean, it wasn't just the book and movie. There's other legend for however long that the Grail is actually the bloodline of Jesus. And what is your take on that since you've been researching this?
It's a great question because I wonder the same thing every day. But I think the Grail is something that if we ever find out what it is, I think that it will astonish all of us because I think that there's so much more to it than what we can really even come up with in our heads. I think that the Grail could very possibly be the knowledge of the bloodline of Christ. But what I also think it could be is knowledge, really. And it could be the knowledge of the bloodline, and it could be knowledge of, many other things. But I think the Grail holds a very sacred aspect. And I think that sacred aspect is some of the teachings that are noted in, throughout Masonic orders around the world, and including Cistercian orders and the Order of the Knights Templar. And I think that they were preserving these ideologies. And I think that's why the church chose to put down the Templars on October 13th, 1307, because Friday the 13th, because they were aware of this knowledge and it was a threat to the church. And I think they had the Holy Grail, or they knew where it was.
That's what I have always thought too. But
yes, the Roman Catholic Church chose October 13th because we were talking about the association with 13 earlier. Mm-hmm. They chose that day on purpose to send a message to the Templars to say, hey guys, we're on to you.
Just bizarre. You know, the history is not a dry subject. So many people are just like, oh, please. And, you know, you get the eye roll. And history is fascinating. It's so much because it's not just, you know, learning by rote dates and, you know, names and such. It's stories and it's experiences. And if you're lucky enough to find it, it's just everything. Everything. I just cannot express enough how much I wish people would give it a little bit more respect as a topic. I know you do, that you give it that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just, it opens the world. So, we only have about a minute before we go for our next break, and I'm going to go ahead and take it since we have come to a subject change point and not have to leave poor John asking us not to stop for break. But we will be right back, and this will be our final segment. If you have questions for Hayley, go ahead and pop them into chat. We will make sure she gets them. And see you on the flip side.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama. To the believer, the evidence is overwhelming. To the skeptic, there will never be enough. Hello, everyone. Join Kevin and Jennifer Melick, the host of Paraversal Universe, every Friday here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Also heard on WCEC-FM and The Rift. Log on or tune in as they check out the mysteries found within the 8 categories of the unknown and unexplained, including ghosts and haunted places, aliens and UFOs, theology and mythology, cryptids and monsters, urban legends and folklore, conspiracies, metaphysics, and forbidden archaeology. Listen as Kevin and Jennifer interview the top minds in their respective fields as they share theories and information regarding these unsolved mysteries. For future show and archive information, one can find Paraversal Universe on Facebook, Twitter, and MeWe under various Paraversal Universe headings. So, for excellent talk radio about the unknown and unexplained, check out Paraversal Universe, where all paranormal perspectives apply. Brought to you by the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society, LTD, and produced by WBHMTV.com.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. And we're back just like that with my guest, Hayley Ramsey, to Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. Hayley, this is our last segment. We have got 15 minutes, and I want to make sure that people know how to find you so that they can follow your experiences and such. And I know that they're going to want to keep up with you as you go through France. Is there going to be a blog, or are you going to just do that on your Facebook?
Well, I post a lot of my adventures on Instagram, and my username on Instagram is my first name, Hayley, middle initial A, last name Ramsey. So I post a lot of my adventures on there. I am working to get together a YouTube channel, and I did get a real nice camera to take with me to France and Scotland, because there is a lot of stuff I want to document and talk about and share with everybody. So definitely look for YouTube links on my social media, on my Facebook, and on my Instagram.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I cannot wait until you get a YouTube, because I am going to be your first subscriber. But we we have a question in chat from John D. And he says that he believes he saw a video on your Facebook page about a stone that seemed to show the aspect of birth with the sun reflection going up and death with the sun reflection going down. Could you discuss where that is located?
A stone with, could you repeat that?
Certainly. A stone that seemed to show the aspect of birth with the sun reflection going up and death with the sun reflection going down.
That's a good. I'm kind of having a hard time relating to this. I don't know if he's making a reference to the table at America's Stonehenge.
Let's see. He's not sure. He just saw it on your page. Let me go look at your page right quick.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either. I mean, we do talk about the stone table at America's Stonehenge, and it's believed, a lot of people like to call it a sacrificial table, but I take a new twist on it and propose that it was actually used for birthing, and the grooves were used to channel fluid from the birth, because it's not a very clean thing to do to give birth. It's a very messy thing, and there's a lot of fluid involved, and so even today they use apparatuses to channel the fluid, and it's a very messy process. And so why wouldn't the ancients use some kind of apparatus to try to keep the birth as clean as possible?
I just think I think it's so interesting, because when we spoke about it, when Dennis was on with me, I was like, a sacrificial stone? That's interesting. And because it was huge, it looked huge. And I was just kind of like, oh, John said it could be a cave drawing.
A cave drawing. I'm trying to think of. Oh, okay. I'm familiar. I'm recalling. Yes, it is a site in France. Please verify this, John. Let me know if this is what you're talking about. There is a site in France that is inside this cave, and it is on my Facebook. So what it looks like actually is the shape of the churches I was mentioning, like Notre Dame and Chartres Cathedral. It is the same shape, and it appears to be the shape of the woman with her knees up in the birth-giving position. Mm-hmm. And this cave inscription also shows there's 3 sets of pairs of circles, and I think that these pairs of circles represented internal organs. And so if you're looking at this, you see on the top what it looks like the top of the knees. And so if we're looking at the knees, working our way up or down, I suppose, you would see the first organs being the ovaries right there. And the next organs would be the kidneys, and then we would have the lungs. And so I believe I saw this illumination on the fall equinox when I was in France, and this is not far from Carnac. And it's a wonderful site right on the beach. You can easily miss it. But you go inside, and there's these inscriptions. And this one, like I'm talking about, seems to be the mother goddess symbol representing a woman in the birth-giving position with these pairs of organs. This is my interpretation completely. I have no idea what other work has been done. I have not been able to find any other work done on this inscription and interpretation of this stone feature. And so my interpretation is that as the sun illuminates the stone on the sunset of the fall equinox, I was there actually like September 21st or 22nd. It was perfect timing. The sun will illuminate the stone, and then as the sun sets, it'll leave parts of the stone in darkness. And so the top of it shows the knees. And ultimately, the pair of organs that's lit up next is the ovaries. And so the sun's actually going down, leaving parts of the top of it into darkness till it totally fades. So these ovaries would be talking about, the first stages of life, of birth. And then the next set of organs would be the kidneys. And the kidneys would symbolize this cleansing, this purification, and, preparation to return to the womb of Mother Earth. And so the lungs would represent the last breath. And as the lungs are the last thing to remain illuminated, it would fade to black, and that would be symbolic of the last breath before we return to the womb of Mother Earth. And this is in a cave there, a feature that is right on the ocean. And a lot of the time it's flooded, but there's also other inscriptions in there that I haven't quite come to a conclusion about. But one appears to be a calendar, a menstrual calendar, because it had 13 markings on it, and it was really fascinating to me too. So there's multiple rooms featured in here, and I believe, with the archaeoastronomy and the sacred aspect of this part of the cave, I think it was used either as a menstrual hut for women, or it was a place where women came to give birth.
Fascinating. And he said, yes, that's it.
Perfect. Yes, and menstrual huts are something that not a lot of people know about. But I can speak to this in Lakota culture. When I was going to ceremony, one of the elders, she asked me, I want to make sure it's not your moon time. And I was like, oh, why would you ask me that? And she explained to me that in their culture, women don't come to ceremonies during their moon time because they're so powerful. And that is why they stay away. And typically in their culture, a long time ago, there was a house where all the women would gather during their moon time, and they would stay there and they would pray. And it was a time of, wisdom seeking and connecting with Mother Earth. And in cultures all around the world, this is the case. There was menstrual huts where women would go, and typically when you live outside and you're living with other women, your cycles are, synchronized. And so they would all go together at this time and support one another. They would bleed to the cave floors and, become one with Mother Earth again. So it was a really, really special kind of thing. And so this cave in France could have very well be a menstrual hut, or it could have been a birthing cave where people would go to give birth, featuring the several rooms, but it could have been where they were staying during that time. But unfortunately, it tends to flood more often than not. So it's kind of hard to find any evidence there. I think we couldn't look for organic components in the earth there because it's been flooded so many times. So it's really hard to kind of verify what we thought or think that it could be.
That's fascinating. Well, I was curious because you reference through here, and I mean, this book, y'all, you're going to absolutely have to get your hands on this book. I am so excited to have a chance to peruse the chapters and the information that's in here. And it's The Bringers of Life, The Cosmic History of the Divine Feminine. And it will be released and available this spring. And I will be standing on my Amazon button with my toes tapping, waiting to get it. So I am curious. You had mentioned the Bermuda Triangle and the Mediterraneans and culture, philosophers' opinions on women, religion, goddess worship, Roman and Greek goddesses, corruption of the Med, Bermuda Triangle's connection to the divine feminine, and going into the sacred feminine triangle.
Yeah.
The Bermuda Triangle is not that old of a recognized issue, is it? Or is it? Am I incorrect?
Well, there have been accounts going back centuries, and I wish I was more familiar with them, but going back, there have been people sailing to North America from the Mediterranean, from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, every place you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
There have been people coming here. It's not like, and we've got to think too, they didn't have everyday lives where they had to wake up early and think, oh gosh, I hope I get to work on time, and then think about what are they going to have for dinner after work. That wasn't what they did. Ancient people didn't do that all day. They didn't have 9-to-5 jobs and kids to take to soccer practice after school. They had better things to be worrying about, like what are they going to eat? How are they going to survive this winter? And how is the environment around them going to supply them? And when they weren't being supplied, if they were having bad weather, if they were having a drought, they would be thinking, okay, where can we go to next? Where can we go to next? So ultimately, North America, it's not a new concept. There have been people coming here for thousands of years. So that being said, there have been many documented accounts of voyagers experiencing unexplained phenomena in the Bermuda Triangle. And now, of course, the triangle shape is associated with the feminine, and it is off the coast, of course, of Florida and in the area of the Bahamas. And so that whole area, there's been so many weird things happening there. Now, we don't really know what it is. There have been people that have said it's a vortex. There have been people that have said it's, a portal. It's this, it's that. It's a harnessing of technology or of energy. And so from my understanding, this harnessing of energy, it's really talking about these the currents in the ocean. And they're all going these crazy different directions in this area. It's wild, and it's just very strange. And the shape of it being really generally a triangle is even more interesting. So I kind of just would like to bring those connections together and talk about one of our very well-known explorers. So we all know who Christopher Columbus is, who sailed the ocean blue in 1492. And he came to North America and has written accounts of going through the Bermuda Triangle and experiencing some pretty strange phenomena. But if he's coming to North America, it's also imperative to recall that he was actually flying the Templar flags on his ship, and he was a Templar. And if you Google a photo of Christopher Columbus, one of the first photos that comes up is a photo of him holding his hand to his chest, and his middle finger and ring finger are together, and his pinky and his index finger are not. They are spread apart, making a sign that resembles an M. And this M sign is seen all throughout Templar art, all throughout, the Catholic churches. And this M sign is symbolic of the feminine, of Mother Mary, goddess, and 13 has more to do with it than we think, because M is also the 13th letter in the alphabet, coincidentally. Coincidence, I don't know, but anyway, so the connection there is just really interesting because a lot of ancient explorers happened upon it. Christopher Columbus was a member of the Templars. Why was he really coming to America? And also it's interesting that the Bermuda Triangle is the shape of a triangle, which is also the universal shape of the feminine. So
yes.
Interesting connection there.
That is an interesting connection. And you know what? We are almost out of time. I cannot believe that this time frame has just flown by so quickly. I have enjoyed you, Hayley. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me. I'd love to be here. It's so much fun talking about all these things and sharing my findings and my knowledge that I've gained from others and with everybody, because it's a lot of stuff people don't know about, but I think would like to know about.
Well, I have definitely enjoyed it because this is not something that I was incredibly well versed in prior to our discussion. I'm still obviously not, but I am so ready to research this more. I am excited to get a chance to talk to you again, and I would like to go ahead and plan that for when your book is actually coming out. And so we can let people know where they can go to get it at that time. I am going to let you know that Dennis Stone, who owns America's Stonehenge, said that you were fantastic. So,
well, thank you, Dennis.
He has enjoyed your show. And I have too. And that being said, Hayley, we will schedule something and get it done. For everyone listening, y'all are the reason that we do this. I have enjoyed being able to bring you this information. I think John said, what a great learning experience for me in chat. And John, I agree. This has been a great learning experience for me as well. I have so much more stuff to read and research. I am going to be busy for days and weeks, maybe months. But, I am going to be traveling next week. I am going to be doing the Paranormal Experience show on the 24th with Sasha Clanat. And Sasha, if I got that wrong, I am so sorry. But tomorrow night is going to be the Paranormal Pride, and that is going to be a fantastic show. Denise always brings the best guests, and I think that is a great show. I think you will enjoy it. On Friday, we will be having a live Paraversal Universe with Kevin and Jennifer Malik I will be broadcasting that live from the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash, so that'll be a lot of fun. I am not going to be live Sunday for the 28th for a Fate show. I am again going to be out of pocket. I will be rebroadcasting my final interview with Stanton Friedman, though. And the first hour is Stan, and the second hour is Frank Lee, so that's going to be a brilliant show. And thank you for being here. I will catch you, though, Wednesday night, same cat time, same cat channel. Go out there and be the change you want to see. We all have that power. And if you aren't working to change it, you don't get to fuss about it. So, manifest that stuff. We can do it. Just put that energy to good use because we all carry it with us. Thank you again, Hayley. I appreciate you. And y'all have a great week.